rethink the way we plan for transportation. We need a paradigm shift. The way of, when I started in the transportation business, we have this phrase called project and provide. So you project how many cars there will be on the road, and you provide a number of lanes. But very soon you realize you cannot continue to widen the roads because your projection shows that there will be more and more cars. So we need to rethink the way we do transportation. This is a very clever man, Albert Einstein. He said, we cannot solve problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So when we created the cars, we have one set of thinking. To solve the issue of traffic congestion, we have to move to a higher level of thinking, to move to a higher level of solution. We're doing an official plan that will last us another 20 years. Okay, so this is 20 years. And you may say, oh, 20 years is not that long. But if you look back in the last 20 years, what changes have there been? I can assure you that we don't realize often how things have changed in the last 20, 25, 30 years. The World Wide Web is just had its 25th birthday. So the World Wide Web was invented 25 years ago, and only in the last 10, 15 years it becomes really, really popular and it's really a household necessity today. Recycling, if I remember correctly, it came into being in the 70s. People starting to recycle. Now we go into more and more types of recycling. We collect all the organics and we dispose of our garbage differently today because we find that a lot of the things can be reused. Personal cell phones or smartphones or other devices, again, that has revolutionized our lifestyle and the convenience. So, and then the last one is the way we are an inclusive society where everybody's looked after. And so a lot of things have changed. So if you project, and we all know that things are changing much faster today than before. So you can imagine a lot of things will continue to change in the next 20 years as throughout the life of our official plan. So we must plan our cities and communities differently. We must plan our cities and communities differently. This is a picture that most of you can associate with. Some people say, oh, this is Los Angeles, this is somewhere in Texas. This is a picture of the type of community that would come or that would be developed if we focus on one mode of transportation. This is urban sprawl. You have very low density residential communities outside of a denser urban core where all the jobs are. This is the extreme case of where the land use is not working and is causing significant transportation problems. So I'm going to show you a couple of slides to illustrate that. So what we have here is the type of land use that is common in the 40s to the 80s. Planners used to segregate the land use. So they have the school, the retail, the residential areas, the park, the offices, all in different locations. And what you can see is if you want to go from your office to pick up your kids at the school, or you're going from one retail to another retail, they all have to rely on a spine or a major road. The other option is to have more mixed use. Mixed use, the destinations are dispersed, whether you're going shopping or you're going to your gym, there are always something that are close by. So this is more dispersed. So when you compare the two, you can see that the way we arrange our land use pattern has a definite impact on the way we travel and how we travel. So the land use is very, very important. And this is something in the last 10, 20 years that we understand a lot more, and there are a lot more case studies about this. The other thing I want to mention is the provincial government is now also recognizing that this is very important. And I mentioned I've worked on different official plans before. In the past, in the 90s and the early 2000s, there are no legislation regarding land use and transportation. In 2005, the province came out with the Places to Grow Act. It requires certain minimum density, and it requires the urban boundary to have a tighter control over. This is the type of mixed use that planners often talked about. It looks at higher density. It looks at mixed use where your destinations are much closer, and when your destinations are closer, then there are other modes of transportation you can use. I'll talk about a little bit about that later. We also recognize there is the need for different varying degree of density and land use. This is a diagram that shows that typically towards the city core, you have higher density, you have wider roads, you have more amenities, and then the cross-section going out to the more rural areas is you have more singular use, you have lower density, and the mode of transportation also in these areas, as you go from the denser to the less dense, will also differ. The Greater Toronto Area has adopted a development pattern of nodes and corridors, where these nodes or mobility hubs where a lot of mixed-use density will be. People can travel from node to node with transit, rapid transit. Along the corridors, there will be a variety of land uses where it can allow people to have closer origin and destinations. So what about our transportation infrastructure? How do we plan our transportation infrastructure? I'm going to put this up. Oh, let me go back to this one. I'm going to put this up and let you take a look at it while I have a sip of water. Can you tell me what are the pros and cons of this? What are the good things and the bad things about this? This is actually a real, it's not drawn up, it's actually a real road network in a city. Lack connectivity, okay? This lacks connectivity. You can see there are a lot of these cul-de-sacs or roads that don't lead to anywhere. Forces everything to the arterial, right? So even if you say, if you live here and your friends live over there, you can't get to him or her, and you have to get onto your local street, get onto the collector, and then get to the other point. These arterials, because of the lack of intersections through them, they becomes a barrier. They becomes like a moat to a castle, and people can't get across. And the other bad thing about this is that cars will tend to travel much faster because there seems to be unimpeded. Okay. The good thing, there are good things about this. Otherwise, it won't be developed like this. Is that you do get a lot of privacy. You don't get through traffic coming through your local streets. Okay. This is the other example. So here you see a much denser grid network. Again, going back to Regional Councillor Jim Jones' point, there's a lot of connectivity. You're not forced onto the arterials. You can use the local street to get from one neighborhood to another neighborhood. If you think about it, the trip length from A to B will be shorter as well, because you can have a more direct route, which means other mode of transportation becomes more attractive. It is easier to walk around here than in the other one, and the whole community becomes more walkable, more transit-friendly, and more bike-friendly. So these are the two extremes, and we have to understand these principles and the dynamics of these road patterns, so that we don't inherently, or we don't design something that will only favor one type of transportation. So obviously the one on the left-hand side is more better for the cars, and the one on the right-hand side is more equal for almost. Yes?
Just a question. An interesting thought for discussion at some point might be if there's anything we can do to retrofit an existing pattern like the one on the left. Now, we do something more connected. I mean, we can put bike lanes or paths in, I guess, is the obvious one. There's probably not a lot else we could do with the existing built form. We can avoid building those kind of things, which we're trying to do, but is there anything else we can do to retrofit?
That's the challenge. No, that's a good point. And we do have redevelopment in certain areas. And with redevelopment, maybe we can, for example, we are redeveloping this block. We can then look at whether we can reconnect some of these roads, or whether City of Toronto have done a number of major redevelopment, in Jamestown, Regent Park. Those areas, they've actually gone back and put in the original road network that was destroyed in the 50s and 60s. Yes?
Is there some bylaw that you guys can do, like to put catwalks, for example? Like when I lived in Mississauga years and years ago, there were catwalks everywhere, and whenever there was a new development that came in, a catwalk would be required. If there is if they live in a court or anything like that, there would be a catwalk that you could take to those modes that you call them.
Right.
So people can actually take transit. Because, if you live in those courts, you wouldn't want to walk all the way around just so you can take a bus.
That's right, yes.
It's very inconvenient.
Right.
Isn't there some sort of bylaw that we can do whenever
it's not so much of a bylaw, but we actually do make those comments when we see a development application that comes in. We make sure that their connectivity, you see them in Markham as well. You see a lot of the walkways between houses. They're public walkways between houses that goes out into the intersections. A lot of them, you see them in the Milliken area. There are a lot of them. And even in the new areas, we are also encouraging a lot of those to make sure that people can and will take other modes of transportation, so they're not sort of boxed in and the only way to get out is to drive. So you're absolutely right, yeah.
Isn't there some sort of regulation you can enforce that as opposed to
it's not so much,
amended?
it's not so much we need to have a bylaw or enact a piece of legislation to do that. We do it as part of our development review commenting. So we said you need to put a sidewalk in here, and the landowners and the developers will work with us to make sure that something like that will happen. We also make allowances. So for example, if this is now being redeveloped, we know eventually this gets redeveloped. We will start planning for that as well to make sure that there connectivity in the future to connect to that. So yes, you're absolutely right. A lot of the important thing is we have to have it envisaged in our plan. To retrofit is expensive, it's disruptive, unless we're going through major redevelopment where you're looking at a section of community. So I think by these illustrations you can understand some of the challenges that we have, and this is actually a page out of the official plan. This is map 11, the mine collectors. You can see the way, you can actually see within Markham which era that it was developed. You can see that these are the more disconnected road network. As we moved into what we call the official plan area 5, Amendment 5, OPA 5 area north of 16th Avenue, you see a lot more connectivity. You see the road that are going from one concession to another section. We've got east-west road and north-south roads. Whereas in the older part of Milliken, a lot of them are not connected. I can talk a lot more about road connectivity later on. I just want to show you this. This is North York. Look at the grid pattern of roads. You can imagine if you're going from north to south, there are a lot of alternatives. If you live on this street, you can go down the street. If you live on this street, you can go down the street. If you have friends over on this side, you can go right across. And rather than the other picture whereby you have to get onto arterial and then get off an arterial because of no connectivity. This is the North York Center.